Okay, so let's dive into human thought patterns, right? So the data in this section will help you sort of recognize why you do the things that you do and get the results that you have. There's a lot of information that's going to be packed into this. So if you need to rewatch it and review it at any time, just to kind of make sure that you're fully grasping it, you totally should. So first of all, we'll talk about just human thought patterns, or it's not even patterns, but just, yeah, how many thoughts does the average person have? And in my research, there were a few different theories on this and things, but what I found was the most common answer is that per day, we have over 6,000 thoughts that go through our minds. And that boils down to about over 250 per hour and over 4 per minute. And you think about that, that is actually quite a bit when you're thinking about it, because kind of a thought isn't just naturally or necessarily a fleeting thing. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's something that you ruminate on a little bit more, right? So when you think about this, of the thoughts that we have, they've also determined that about 80% of them are negative. And if you think about that just for a moment, I'm sure you can probably see that as true. Kind of, if you think about the thoughts that go on in your brain on kind of an average time, what comes out of fear, what's negativity. And honestly, the reason for this is because the brain is truly wired for survival. So it's always looking for danger. It's always looking for things that are going wrong. So it's not your fault that this is happening if you find yourself falling into negative thought patterns. It's just your brain's natural wiring and what it wants to do. But 80% of the thoughts are negative. 95% of the thoughts are repetitive. So really think about that. Like when you have negative thoughts and you're repeating them most of the time, then what might that create for you in your results, right? And think of how often that happens as well. Like if something good happens to you, you're not typically spending a lot of time ruminating on that, right? You maybe think it's a fluke, or you kind of brush it off, or you feel weird celebrating it. But if something bad happens, then you're okay sort of telling everybody about it and ruminating on it a lot more and letting it kind of circle in your head to try to figure it out, right? Again, that's the brain's wire for survival. And according to Shad Helmstetter in the book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, repetition is a very convincing argument, and it definitely is. So again, if you have all of these negative thoughts coming through, you're just going to keep believing them the more and more and more that you repeat them in your brain. So let's dive into sort of the whole behavior pattern. And this is where I'm just going to run through it kind of quickly, but keep up if you can. And if you have any questions also for the community at the end of all of this to kind of clarify it more, feel free. But the programming, like we discussed, is what I had mentioned about the inherited thoughts. So these are thoughts that we've been given, and now it's just kind of our basic programming and wiring of the way that we've been raised, right? So then that creates just the thoughts that we have on a regular basis. Then our thoughts become our beliefs, and beliefs are basically just your most practiced thoughts, right? It's the thoughts that you think more and more and more, you believe them to be very true, so they just become beliefs. Your beliefs will then determine your attitude. So the attitude is sort of your judgment you have about these beliefs, right? So the belief is good or bad, and that creates your attitude. The attitude creates the feeling. So if you have an attitude that something is good, you'll have good feelings that come along with it. If you think something is bad, you will have negative feelings that come along with it. And then the feeling will create the action, right? So any action that we take is based off of the feeling. So let's take the example of, any kind of confrontation you have with somebody. That's a great example to me of seeing the difference of how a feeling can affect the action. So if you think that somebody confronting you is bad, you might feel defensive, and then you might lash out at them, right? So you have a belief that it's bad. Your attitude is that it's bad. It turns into a negative feeling, and the action is lashing out. Although if you think that it's good, if you think that maybe a confrontation can lead to something positive and you consider it a good thing, then you'll feel more peaceful, right? You'll feel more peaceful in this interaction. You won't let it get to you. And then your action is that you'll approach it much more calmly, and you're far more likely to come up with a resolution that everybody is happy with rather than, lashing out or being accusatory or, anything like that. So then your action in final is then producing your result that you have. So in the case of the confrontation, how would each way impact a relationship? If you were to lash out and get angry in the confrontation, it would likely deteriorate your relationship with that person. Whereas if you acted more calmly, then it would likely either just stay neutral or even create just a better platform for your relationship to grow and connect. Right. So that is your result that you have, is what is the result of the relationship in that specific example. And so it's just really important to recognize that really every action that we take is really rooted out of what emotion that we are feeling. So you might hear people say, I'm not an emotional person, but that is not true, because they definitely are. You totally are. We all are. We all have emotions. It's whether or not we recognize them as the reason for why we're doing what we're doing, or, acknowledging that they're there and that we're able to, be aware of them. So you have very little control of your emotions, but you have total control over your thoughts. So this is huge to understand. So if you, for example, have somebody or, a child maybe in a circumstance who is throwing a fit or just having a total meltdown, we might try to tell them to get control of their emotions, right? But sometimes that can come off in a way that makes it sound like control your emotions means stuffing your emotions down, don't have them. But in understanding that emotion actually comes from your thoughts and your programming, then you actually need to go further down the line. Whereas the emotional reaction is just a symptom, or it's an effect of a cause of whatever thought it is that you're having in your head, right? So they don't need to control their emotions. That's not what needs to happen. They need to question their thoughts. So if somebody is having a meltdown, if it is a child, likely it's something that they just don't feel safe for some reason, or they're feeling like something is really unfair, right? There's plenty of reasons of what a kid might be thinking, but very often we don't explore what their thoughts are in that moment, where if you were to really try to talk to them, and of course on their level try to reason and try to figure out what it is that they're thinking, you might be able to actually get them to calm down, not only in that moment, but in future flare-ups as well, if this is something that they're prone to do. Always getting to the root cause is the best way to remedy a situation like that, if you can. So like I mentioned, if you want to make any changes, you need to interrupt the cycle from the very beginning of the whole trail. So if you can challenge the programming, which is what I'm hopefully helping you do in this module, and you can question what you've been given, you can question your default nature and start turning things around so that your results are more positive than what they've been up to this point. And so I want to talk a little bit too about problems, because we also have a tendency to feel as though we have a lot of problems every day, right? Our lives seem just riddled with them. We're faced with obstacles every day, or what we feel are obstacles. And the thing is, the question to ask is, what makes something an actual problem, right? And it is that it's the expectation that it should be any different than what it is, that life should just be sunshine and rainbows, and we shouldn't have any of these obstacles or any of these hiccups. And the expectation of having that means anytime that we do see something that isn't that way, we tend to not like it and we consider it a problem. Some we feel are bigger than others, right? But the majority of our problems really are not actually problems. And I want to pause for a second there, because I want you to really think about this. The majority of our problems are not actually problems. This is normal life. A lot of the things that we deal with are very normal, natural things that happen. And it's how we react to it, and it's our thoughts about them that make them problems. Let's take some examples here, right? Traffic jams, long waits at restaurants, people that disappoint us, that don't do what we want them to do or hope they'll do, right? Some of those are good examples. So to go more specifically on the traffic example, if you're always told that, traffic jams are terrible, and this is what you hear from everybody, right? Everybody thinks that traffic jams are terrible. So you're like, yes, I'm going to definitely believe that. That feels very true, because that's what everybody believes. And then you get into a traffic jam right? And there you're sitting, and let's just say you're on the highway, but you're at a standstill. And all you're thinking is, what a problem this is. And that'll leave you feeling very frustrated, right? You'll get angry and upset. And your action is that you'll be very high stress, and you'll probably, maybe let out some expletives, right? You might swear a little bit, be mad at the other drivers, get some road rage, and just complain. And the result is that you just kind of continue to reinforce that this is a problem. You might, even with all of this high stress, you might impact your actual health, because it's definitely been linked that high stress and anxiety and things like that do harm your actual physical health as well. And you'll just be mad in every single traffic jam. You might also perpetuate this anger and this frustration later on in your day. So if you're on your way home, maybe you start like yelling at your spouse or yelling at your kids or whoever it is, or, calling somebody and venting and being really frustrated because this is the way that you've approached just this one traffic jam, which probably happens quite a bit, right? But if you were to actually challenge the programming and that it wasn't a problem, then you could consider that traffic jams are totally normal. It's totally okay. That might leave you with more of a feeling of peace and calm. And as an action, you could maybe just, enjoy a podcast or your favorite music, maybe open the windows, enjoy the scenery. It's probably scenery that you don't typically see very often because you're driving, faster, and you can't really take a look around. So you could see a lot of things that you've never seen before. You could smile at other people in cars. However they react, depending on their thoughts about it, might be a little bit different too. But then honestly, you're just doing less harm to yourself, less harm to your own nervous system, and you're not carrying it with you for the rest of your day. And you're just being, generally more present and safer as well. In a lot of anger, people don't drive necessarily as well as they do when they're in a calm state. So you can see how an example like that it could turn around, and how much of an effect applying that concept to your whole life might change everything for you. So that was a good external example, but really, what if you considered also that nothing about you as a person is a problem? This is where we kind of connect back to the self-worth portion, right? So we're so used to seeing problems everywhere that when we look inside ourselves, we also try to sort of pin some problems and think of things that are wrong with us. So what are you thinking of yourself all the time? What parts of you do you consider to be a problem? Maybe there's things that you feel like you could never do that you see other people do, or that things that you're terrible at, or you won't be able to do. Maybe what kind of physical things you have that you just hate about yourself. I think we're all susceptible to that as well, right? But just remember, many of these thoughts were not created in your own brain. This is programming that you were given. This isn't something you were born with. As a baby, when you were just little and had no idea, these weren't thoughts that you were having naturally. And you got to pay attention to the media as well. That has a huge, huge, huge factor on how you see yourself. So that tells us a lot about body image, which I don't know about you, but I have been seeing a lot more advertisements of real bodies and real people, and not nearly as much Photoshop. And I am loving it. So hopefully we keep going down that train, because we've been delivered a body image, idea of what we should look like that is not realistic. But we still feel like that's what we should try for, right? And then also we look, and we see how, family should look like, and what the highlight reels of our friends on social media and things like that. And we see all of these things and we think, wow, if they, maybe they have a perfect relationship and I'm single, and that's terrible. But then on the other hand, you see a lot of people who, suddenly a divorce has happened and you have no idea where it has come from, right? So these are just the things that we view and that we're given, and we soak them up. And so we can challenge, like, what is the truth of the matter? What is it actually, right? And yeah, so you just got to take a look at all of that. What is filtered? What photos are actually filtered that you might not even realize it? And stop, comparing yourself to these other unrealistic expectations, and really finding some more worth in yourself. So again, you can disconnect from these ideas you're given and create something new, because your brain is truly, truly just an operating system. So all you have to do is change the programming. I say all you have to do is, if it's easy, we'll work through it. It's going to take some time, but you can do it. So for this module, we've got some or just one worksheet available, which is about repetitive thoughts. So basically, in this exercise, you will take it and you'll set a timer and you'll see what thoughts are just naturally coming up for you and also which ones are repetitive. Sort of go through the exercise that I mentioned in the beginning of how many thoughts do you have per minute and which ones are, negative and that kind of thing. So it's kind of just a fun little exercise. And I think I've got the timer for, if you set it for 3 minutes, what comes up. So you definitely have time for it. And I would be super curious to hear what you come up with. And I'm sure the community will be too. So please share with us because I'd be really, really interested to see how this works out for you. So now that we've examined kind of the current agreements and know all about kind of that sort of stuff, we're going to talk about awareness. And we're just going to kind of develop a deeper awareness of your patterns, how your actions contribute to your life, and how that impacts you. So I will see you in the next video. Okay.